Here is a family. Both the parents have black eyes. Observe the eye color of their children. The boy has black eyes, but the girl has blue eyes. What can be the reason for this difference? Traits are passed from one generation to the next in the form of genes. As you can see, the trait for blue eyes is present in the grandparents. This means the gene for blue eye color must be present in the parents, but it was unable to express its effect. However, the same gene could be expressed in one of the offspring. This shows that inheritance of traits follows certain rules. Many people contributed towards the understanding of the rules of inheritance. But Gregor Johann Mendel was the first to demonstrate the mechanism of transmission of characteristics. He is considered the father of genetics. Mendel, an Austrian monk, conducted a series of experiments on different varieties of the garden pea plant, Pisum sativum. Mendel studied the inheritance pattern of 7 traits or characteristics of the pea plant. These were plant height, flower color, flower position, fruit or pod color, pod shape, and seed color. He picked 2 contrasting variants or forms for each of these 7 traits. For plant size, the alternative forms were tall and dwarf. For flower color, purple and white. For flower position, axial and terminal. For pod color, green and yellow. Pod shapes selected were inflated and constructed, seed shapes round and wrinkled, and alternative forms for seed color were yellow and green. Mendel conducted a series of experiments with these variants and carefully studied the offspring plants for several generations. Mendel's experiments had 3 main stages: selection of true breeds, hybridization, and self-fertilization or selfing. First, Mendel selected pure or true breeding plants for certain traits. For example, a pure breeding pea plant for white flowers will always produce offspring with white flowers in any generation. At the second stage, he crossed 2 true breeding plants having alternative forms of characteristics. For example, a cross was conducted between a true breeding tall plant and a true breeding dwarf plant. What is meant by crossing? How are plants crossed? Let's continue with our example of crossing between a tall plant and a short plant. During crossing, anthers from flowers of tall plants are removed to prevent self-pollination. Now, pollen grains from short plants are transferred to the stigma of these flowers. This process is known as artificial hybridization or crossing, and the offspring produced are called hybrids. Mendel planted all the seeds produced by these hybrid crosses. The first hybrid generation of offspring produced were called the first filial generation or F1 generation. Finally, at the third stage, the plants of the F1 generation were allowed to self-fertilize and produce the plants of the second filial generation or the F2 generation. Mendel first studied inheritance patterns for alternative forms of a single trait. For example, he crossed tall plants with short, white-flowered with purple-flowered, yellow-seeded plants with green-seeded, and so on. He called these crosses, involving the study of only one trait, the monohybrid crosses. Let's take the example of a monohybrid cross between a purple-flowered plant and a white-flowered plant. Mendel observed that all the offspring plants produced in the first generation resembled only one of the parents. In this case, all F1 plants had purple flowers and not a mixture of purple and white. He then allowed the F1 generation offspring to self-fertilize and produce an F2 generation. Mendel observed that in the F2 generation, white-flowered plants reappeared. When he counted all the F2 plants, he found purple and white-flowered plants were in a ratio of 3:1. This ratio is popularly known as the Mendelian monohybrid ratio. This indicates that both purple and white-colored traits were inherited in the F1 generation, but only one trait could be expressed. Mendel referred to the trait that was expressed as dominant and the alternative trait that was not expressed as recessive. In this case, purple flower color is dominant, whereas white flower color is recessive. He conducted experiments for all 7 pairs of characteristics and observed similar results. One trait was dominant, while the other was recessive. In the same cross between purple and white-flowered plants, Mendel allowed F2 plants to self-fertilize and produce the F3 generation. He observed that all the F2 white-flowered plants were true breeding. That means they produced only white-flowered plants. Of the purple-flowered F2 plants, only 1/3 were true breeding for purple flowers. The remaining 2/3 of plants were not true breeding. This shows that the 3:1 ratio of purple and white flowers is basically a 1:2:1 ratio of pure purple, mixed purple, and pure white-flowered plants. In another series of experiments, Mendel studied the inheritance pattern of 2 traits. He crossed plants that differed in 2 traits. He called these crosses dihybrid crosses. Let's study one such dihybrid cross between parental plants that differed in seed shape and seed color. A plant with round and yellow seeds was crossed with a plant with wrinkled and green seeds. In the F1 generation, all plants had round and yellow seeds. This proved that the round seed shape is dominant over wrinkled and the yellow seed color is dominant over green. In F2 generation, Mendel obtained progeny plants with 4 different types of seeds. These were round yellow, round green, wrinkled yellow, and wrinkled green. These plants were in a ratio of 9:3:3:1. This ratio is popularly known as a Mendelian dihybrid ratio. This ratio of 9:3:3:1 can be derived as a combination of two independent monohybrid ratios of 3:1, ratio of round-wrinkled, and 3:1 ratio of yellow-green, as shown here. In 1865-66, Mendel proposed certain generalizations on the basis of his breeding experiments. Mendel's generalizations were: all characters are controlled by discrete units called factors. Factors occur in pairs. One member of the pair dominates the other. Factors segregate in the F2 generation in a ratio of 3:1. Factors for two different traits also assort independently. Mendel's work remained unnoticed for a long time. It was in 1900 that his work was rediscovered by three botanists: Hugo de Vries, Karl Correns, and Erich von Tschermak. They raised Mendel's generalizations to the level of laws. These are popularly known as Mendel's laws of inheritance.